as you know, every Sunday we are joined by Dr. Bhagat, and today's topic is intestines. I wish Nkabi gets in before this. Good morning, Dr. B.
Good morning. I don't mean eating intestines. I don't mean phobia. I mean the actual of the intestine. Yeah. We're moving on now, and finally we got to the stage where we're talking about the intestines. Now, the intestines are a fascinating organ which will divide into the small intestine and large intestine, because there's so much really to talk about. But the basics are that the small intestine has three parts. We call it the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. You don't need to remember these words, but there are different parts of it. It's actually about half a meter long. It's really long.
Wow, half a meter.
Yeah. It's actually half a meter. So it's 500 centimeters. It's a really long organ. It can actually twist on itself. It can get lots of diseases because there's a lot to cover. You know, the surface area is almost the surface area of a tennis court. It's really huge.
It's huge. Yes.
Yeah, and the reason is because it is the part of the body that absorbs all your nutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, your starch, your fats, your proteins, and water from food. So they can be used by the body. So this is a really important thing to remember. Remember, the stomach is there to almost act like a reservoir. It makes a little bit of acid, and then it dumps it into the small intestine, which is the main function, is mainly to absorb the nutrients and minerals. And if it goes wrong, then you're obviously in trouble. So it's really important to understand that if your intestines are in any way disturbed, either by an infection or an inflammation or antibiotics that you take, you're going to get sick. You're going to lose weight. You're going to feel nauseous. Your stomach will run because you're not digesting food. You get bloaty. You get crampy. And, 3,000-4,000 years ago, the father of medicine, Hippocrates, said that let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. He also said that, if you have a bad gut day, you have a bad brain day. And the reason is that if you bloat and you cramp and you're constipated or you're having a running stomach, it affects your hormones. Now, a really interesting thing that's come out, Zoo, in the last probably 10 to 12 years is we've discovered that when a baby is actually forming in the mother's womb, the inside lining of the gut actually originates from the same cells as that lines the brain.
All right.
So whatever goes on in your brain also goes on in your gut, which, in other words, what we're trying to say is your gut almost is your second brain.
Okay.
It has the same chemicals. So if you're depressed, your stomach also is depressed, if for want of a better word.
Yes.
Everybody knows, you're going to go and give a talk, or you're standing up in front of a crowd. Your stomach grumbles. You want to go to the toilet.
The bathroom, yes.
Absolutely. And the reason is all the chemicals in your brain that causes anxiety also causes anxiety in your stomach, and that's the reason why also you lose appetite, because it shuts down everything, because you're on a sort of almost fight or flight drive where you're having to talk in front of your boss, or you're in front of a judge, or you're in front of a policeman. And
yes, that's got you nervous.
Yeah, so this is the reason why that we're beginning to understand that what goes on in your small intestine, your duodenum, your jejunum, and your ileum, really plays an important role in terms of generally how you feel. Now, in terms of the things that can go wrong, obviously the first thing is infections. You can get, if you drink contaminated water, if you eat phobia, or if you eat seswa that's not been cooked well, or it's been left out and has gone bad, within literally 15-20 minutes your gut will complain, and it'll writhe, and it'll cramp, and it'll bloat, and you'll feel really sick, because the toxins get into your system. Now, the most important thing to remember, Zoo, is that there is only one cell layer lining that separates the gut from the inside of the body. In other words, one layer of paving. And so that layer can be damaged by lots of things. And the most important thing in our environment is infections. If you don't wash your hands, having contaminated food, if you have food poisoning, if you have water poisoning, if you're dehydrated, you can break down.
Dr. Bhagat, water poisoning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the water has chemicals, for example,
yes.
If you're taking water from that's been heavily chlorinated, we use chlorine to clean the water, but if there's too much chlorine, it can destroy the inside lining. Common things that we always talk about that also destroy the inside lining, Zoo, is sugar. Anything that is processed, the sugary foods, the excessively oily food that is cooked in the sort of seed oils we talked about that are not good for you, the sunflower, the linseed, the soya, the safflower, those things actually cause inflammation of your gut and can cause problems. And people know it, I mean, there's a condition that we want to talk about. One is an inflammation of the small intestine. That's called Crohn's disease, and it's an autoimmune condition, basically where the body attacks the gut itself, amongst other things. And people feel crampy, they have diarrhea, they really don't feel well, and we actually have to treat them with pretty strong anti-autoimmune drugs. That's very common, Zoo, is a condition called irritable bowel. And irritable bowel, which a lot of people have but don't realize they have it, is where you eat something and suddenly within literally 25, 30 minutes, you really feel lousy. You bloat, you get acid, you get heartburn, you've got lots of gas, your body cramps, you have to loosen the belt on your dress or your trousers. Everybody knows that. And what's happening is your small intestine is complaining to say, I can't eat this stuff, I can't digest this stuff, I haven't got the right enzymes.
Yeah.
And the commonest things, as we know, are very processed stuff. If you eat a lot of boroto, if you eat a lot of palachi, if you eat too much of this mafresh, this thing will actually make your stomach rise, your intestines rise in discomfort. And people still do it. They'll overcome it because it's not going to kill them. And they don't learn the lesson. They keep bloating, and they want to come to the doctor to say, give me something to stop the bloating, rather than going upstream and saying, what has caused all of this? So the majority of the diseases of the small intestines are actually self-induced, other than the major ones of inflammation, which are autoimmune. Most of it is, if you make sure you have clean water, you wash your veggies properly, you don't eat meat that's been sitting for too long, and of course avoid all those sugary, starchy foods. You by and large can avoid some of the issues that have got to do with the small intestine. Somebody's asked, how do I know if something's wrong with my small intestine? Well, the commonest sign is actually diarrhea. And that can lead to dehydration, malnutrition, and weight loss. So if you find that you're bloating, you're cramping, you're getting a running stomach after eating, there's something wrong with your small bowel, because that's where everything is digested. So that's really important. If you have loss of appetite, nausea, diarrhea, unintentional weight loss, go and see your doctor. Somebody's asked you, Naka, how do doctors check the small intestine? Well, good question. The easiest way to check the small intestine is you go to see a specialist called a gastroenterologist. That's somebody who deals with the gut. And what they do is what's called an endoscopy, which is a camera study where they take a small little camera, pass it down your mouth, into the stomach and into the small intestines, and actually see what's going on. Look to see whether there's inflammation, whether there's bacterial overgrowth, whether there's a cancer, which is not very common in the small intestine, and whether there's inflammation, and they can tell you what to do about that. Somebody's asked you, how do I keep my small intestine healthy? Well, ironically, it's the same things we've talked about for the last year. It's eating a high-fiber diet, making sure that you don't eat too many sugary foods and processed foods, have lots of fiber, which means lots of veggies, lean meat, regular exercise and plenty of water is probably the best way. I call it an anti-inflammatory diet, which is basically reduces inflammation. So that's really important. Somebody's asked a strange question. Can you survive without your small intestine? No, you can't. It'd be very hard to live without a small intestine because you wouldn't be absorbing anything and you'd need intravenous nutrition. So that's really important.
Well, Dr. B, can I ask?
Yes, of course you can. You love talking about the gut.
Yes, because you know me, I love gross things. So, Dr. B, I wanted to know, when it comes to the female and male gut and how it works, like the systems, what is the difference? Like, I know most women, doctors are always saying they should focus on their gut, what they eat, because it really does help us. I mean, the womb is a very sensitive place, it's close to the stomach. But is it also pressed when you talk to the men? I almost said gents, when you talk to the men that come and see you, I don't know if you get my question.
No. Try it again.
Dr. B! Yes, I was saying, in terms of like gut health, which gender suffers the most, and what kind of advice would you give to that gender? Honestly, Zu, I think women look after their bodies in general much better than men, and
if I'm honest, the reason why we see more women with gut problems is they come to the doctor more often. And I think, I'd be wrong in saying that women are more prone to it, but I just think women complain earlier about their gut. If the question also was, do women have different types of gut problems?
Yes.
Not really. However, what we do see is if you are constipated, if you are bloated, you start getting backache. And the reason why you get backache is all that stuff that's sitting in your small and large bowel actually begins to press on your spine and your back. And so you get this terrible backache because
you're kidding, Dr. B.
Absolutely. So if you don't, people have this idea that you can poop once every 2 days or once every 3 days. If you poop not on a daily basis, that poop sits on the back of your spine and causes pain.
Dr. B, that's so gross.
Yeah. So this is really an issue. We've talked about inspecting your poop, but we've also talked about how you need to poop at least once or twice a day. If you're not doing that, you're in trouble. And one of the reasons is a poor digestion. But what I do find about men, particularly our men in our country, is they eat way too much starch and meat and not enough fiber and vegetables. And especially the men don't drink enough water. I don't know what it is about it, but if you're not hydrating, and that we're talking about at least 1.5 to 2 liters a day, if not more during the summer, your bowels are going to get caked up and stoned up, and you're going to start pooping little pebbles. So that's really important, because you're right. In the pelvis sits in women the womb, and in men it's the prostate and the bladder. So sometimes you have this frequency where you want to go and empty your bladder, but actually what's happening is your bowel is full of gas and poo, which you haven't begun to empty out. So that's really important. So that's a good question. And then somebody's asked you, how do you reset your bowels, as if you like pressing reset on a computer? Well, again, it's eating plenty of foods rich in probiotics and prebiotics. I'm talking about legumes, onions, asparagus, oats, bananas. The banana guy hasn't asked a question today. And fermented foods, these are really good things. Like, and I don't know if people know about kimchi and sauerkraut. These are really good. Pickled stuff is very good for your intestines. Somebody's asked, Chan, we're going to talk about it. Exactly, we've talked about it. Can intestines cause back pain? Absolutely. Constipation swells the intestines with retained poop, and this can lead to discomfort in both the back and the abdomen, and can result in a sort of a dull ache like pain. So this is really important. And, when your tummy complains or your bowels complain, listen, because it's trying to tell you something. Either you've eaten something wrong, or you've drunk something wrong, or you've not rehydrated, or you've actually not emptied your bowels. So it's really a good indicator, a good barometer of your general health. And I think health starts in the gut.
All right. Well, Dr. B, I see the last question I have here is, please can you let us know what medicines that people can take for internal issues?
I wonder whether we're talking about the gut, and I think it's really, really important to understand that people should not overdose and abuse two things with regard to that. One is acid-blocking pills. People are rife amongst our communities that go out and get an acid-blocking pill. We're talking about the omeprazole or the Lomep, the Nexium, the Nexpro, the Gaviscon, the Malox. These really are not good in general, because if your stomach or your bowel is complaining, it's because you've done something wrong. So go upstream and ask, what have I done wrong, rather than suppress the acid or indeed take an antibiotic for something that may not be an infection. Because remember, we've talked about this before, is that antibiotics taken on a regular basis actually kill some of the natural gut bacteria in your bowel, which are responsible for your general well-being. Some of the bacteria in your gut produce enzymes to digest food, and we'll talk about it next week when we'll be talking about the large colon, where if you don't get the right gut bacteria because you kill them off by taking lots of antibiotics, you suffer a lot of consequences, which we'll talk about next week.
All right. No, thank you, Dr. B. I'm sure the listeners have gotten so much information on the small intestine. I'm very excited for next week,
We'll talk about the large bowel. That's the large bowel.
Large bowel. Thanks, Dr. B. Have a great Sunday.
You too.
All right. And that was Dr. B and myself with the health check, sponsored by First National. First Capital Bank, this girl. I hope we're all having a great Sunday, and that you are aware that next week we're going to be covering the big large bowel. So the numbers to send a message you are +267 3911 Make sure to also check out the Health Foundation on Facebook to make sure that Dr. Bhagat gets all your questions. All the answers that you'll have will be right there.
Health Check was proudly brought to you by First Capital Bank. Belief comes first.